They moved us over.
Yeah, the only part I was hearing on this one.
Hey, ladies and gentlemen, I think it's time we get started.
Yeah.
I should call the meeting to order, and we'll begin.
So.
Councilman Jensen on the end, if you could start the roll, pass that around, that would be fantastic. Just a couple of announcements as part of our welcoming. As many of you know, Mayor Hatfield passed away recently. Want to just acknowledge that the commission is working on a letter of condolence to his wife and family. Eric, when will that be going out?
That'll probably go just this coming week.
Okay. And is there an opportunity if anyone wants to sign that? Is there a way they could drop by here and sign that, or should we just go ahead and do it as a letter from the...
Well, what does the board think? What we could do is send it out to the board and have electronic signatures come in, and then we could just compile those.
Or just list us.
Thoughts? Anybody like to sign that?
Or we could just,
Just list us all,
we'll list all. Just list all
Okay.
members.
then she'll be able to read our writing.
Thank you. All right, so that we'll let that just go as planned, Eric. Also, we'd like to excuse Chair Shelley Barch, who's had also a death in the family and is out of town today. We express our sympathy and condolences for that event. For the agenda items today, we'll start with just there's the governing board minutes from February. We assume you all received that a few days ago and had a chance to review that. Are there any changes or additions to the minutes that we need to address?
We'll simply be adding Provost Rebecca Andrus from the last one. That edit came in.
To reflect that change?
Yes.
Did you have any other comments?
In our minutes, we include copies of whatever presentations were made.
Did you do that in the minutes or in the?
When we file to the public meeting site, because without presentations, it's sometimes hard to follow copies.
Okay.
Could we do that? Because I thought that
We could, we're not required, but we could do
we
it.
could. I find it easier when I look at meeting minutes and they talk about, well, this person presented, and we discussed their presentation. It's kind of hard to follow it if it's not with the minutes. So our clerk files whatever presentations.
So is it possible to add those then at this point?
It is possible. So maybe what we'll do is, as we have presentations, we can get a motion to, could we include that as part of the minutes so that we have that to look back on, and we'll include those that seem pertinent to the meeting.
So that would not be amending this set of minutes, or can you do it in the future, or you would?
Well,
Go ahead.
I think that last meeting would probably, what were our presentations? Did we have
The Lake Process Restoration.
Restoration Solutions Inc. did their
Yeah.
presentation on the last meeting? That would be a good one, so we will include that. We do have a copy of it.
Great. Okay, any other changes or additions? Okay, we have a motion to approve the minutes.
Make a motion that we approve the minutes.
Okay.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, minutes are approved. We also have the monthly financial report that was distributed. Do you want to address anything on that, Eric?
No, normal, it's just a monthly report, so this is for February. We're within the budget. We're at about halfway through the year, and according to we're just over halfway through the year. And according to the final line there, just above capital projects fund report, we're at 53% used. So right on target as far as budget is concerned for this fiscal year.
Okay. Any questions on the actuals? All right. Do we need to approve these? Do we need a motion for approval on this?
Yes, for the February.
Okay, so we're looking for a motion to approve the February financials.
Make a motion, we approve February financials.
Thank you, Mr. Blake. Any second?
Second.
There we go. Thank you. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Very good. Good. Eric, would you like to review the tentative budget for 2019?
Yes. So for 2019, we have the tentative budget before you. Let's start with the general fund. So there's a few changes. Taxes and benefits on line 1300 is getting adjusted. That one, insurance rates have seemingly gone up, as have a number of other of the benefit expenses. And so that line, we've been really close this year. So we're making an adjustment to that to be sure that we're within that in this coming year. Wages, we bumped that up 3.82%. As you go down the list, public notices, we're typically only doing 1 or 2 public notices per year. And so that just, we haven't been going through that whole amount, so we're just adjusting that a little bit. Postage, again, we're dropping that down a little. We're doing almost all of our communications via email, and so that there just hasn't been the need. There are a few things, typically we'll reach out to private property owners around the lake when we're doing Phragmites treatment, and so there are letters that go out for that, but $200 for that line should be just fine. Food and meals, we're increasing that by 300. That is with the intent of covering one of the lunches from the Utah Lake Water Quality Study group. Typically there's 1 or 2 full-day meetings per year. The Division of Water Quality typically will cover one of those, and we would like to be able to cover the other in the upcoming year. Field trips, you'll see that there's a decrease on the field trips line of 48%. That isn't that we're shrinking our field trips, it's that last year field trips in education included a portion of our paddleboard camp. The paddleboard camp is continuing this year, but without the subsidy per se. The goal last year was to get the camp up and running so that people were aware of it, and so we offered a number of sponsorships, 2 to every school in the valley, and so we gave out as many of those as we could last year. It created a really fun and exciting new option for the summertime sports. And from what we're told, that camp is already packing full of paying participants, so that's great news. But we won't need to do that subsidy on this year's budget, so that's what came off of there. Outreach and event sponsorships, that has come up just a little bit. It historically was $10,000, and last year we moved a few things around to be able to cover everything in the budget, so just bringing that up closer to where it had been historically. Invasive species control, it would appear that that's down substantially. However, you'll notice that under the capital projects fund, we're putting $9,000 into that. Both this year's invasive species allotment and this coming year's is being saved so that we can purchase in the coming year or 2 forestry implement that will go on the end of the county's skid steer, and this will allow us to get down in the upland portions of the lake shore and mow down the Russian olives, salt cedars, any of the tree vegetation up to 10 inches in diameter. That right now are really our only option is getting in there with a hand crew, a much slower process, and this will allow that to get done at a lake-wide level, really, moving forward. The county has a skid steer that's up for renewal on their lease in the end of this year or next year. And when that happens, that'll give us an opportunity to help partner on purchasing that piece. So that's where we're putting those dollars, and that still left us with $3,000 additional dollars that we could dedicate to any projects like funding an extra smaller project along one of the lake shores, which we've done historically. And then the planning for the nature center, that's kind of on hold right now, at least from the commission standpoint. We're still waiting on the Utah Mitigation Commission to complete the purchase of land down there by Utah Lake State Park. And so rather than rebudget that this year, we thought we'd hold off for now and wait until that portion is complete and to reevaluate when land has been acquired. And so that's everything on that. On the general fund,
Any questions on the expense side that we're looking at then? You can see the trends from 2017, 2018, 2019 plan.
okay, so on the membership contributions portion, this last year, Mapleton City asked to be, to no longer be a member of the commission. And so their contribution was $2,700. Essentially, that was just redivided into the existing memberships, which made for a 3% change to the remaining municipalities. If anyone has great clout with Mapleton, we'd love to have them back and would encourage their membership. And we have a number of others that I know some of our members are working on. Councilmember Malkovich is working with one or two of the neighboring cities. It'd be great if we could have all of the cities in the valley be members of the commission.
So did they say why they tapped out, Mapleton?
No,
Was it since Dallas was in, or was it before
It was
that?
just prior to that.
Oh, so Brian.
So it was
Our representative
I
was
like
Jonathan
Dallas.
Reed.
I said, what the heck? I mean, Dallas is trying to build a lake, for heaven's sakes. Of course he should. You guys know what Dallas is doing, right? Never mind. Talk later. I'll talk to her.
Exactly.
And the only other addition on the membership contributions, there's an intended contribution distribution between municipalities, the state agencies, Central Utah Water, and that intended contribution has been adjusted so that it'll be the intended amount. Some of the state and Central Utah and the county had been, because 6 cities were added a few years ago, that was tiered up so that wouldn't happen all at once and be a big surprise to either of the or any of those entities, and so that has just been adjusted a % or so at a time to get back up to where it was intended to be. So that there was a minor change from the county and Central Utah Water this year. Total amount is $291,200.
Any questions on the contribution side or the other participating organization side?
Okay.
Pretty quiet group today. Is everybody awake?
I have a question,
Yes.
just, it won't be rhetorical, but for the cities that have not chosen to participate, is there a general theme of why they don't? Is it a budgetary item? Is it because they don't have property next to the lake? Is it they don't feel a need to participate? Or
I don't know that it has been generally one item. So for some of the smaller cities, it has been a budget item. So for some of our real small, Cedar Fort and Fairfield that are way out to the west, it has been a budget thing.
But they're on the minimum, you have a minimum budget level of
So the minimum
500.
And so theirs just has been a budget issue. Santaquin's has been that they self-contained their wastewater system and felt as though that was a good enough justification to no longer be part. Some of the cities that are, don't have lakefront have historically recognized the need to be part of it because of their stormwater and treated wastewater that ends up in the lake. I would suggest that that's not the only reason to participate, because there's also the constituency of every municipality whose residents are using the lake, or at least having a great desire to use the lake, as long as we can stay on top of the issues that it faces. And so it's super helpful to have participation from all of the municipalities so that we have a budget to
Yeah.
implement some of those
I
projects.
just think it's helpful for all of us to know as we go to talk to our neighboring cities that, maybe some background of why they might not be participating if they've already said something. You don't want to nag them, but you want to encourage.
And some, it has been in the political environment of their elected officials that have elected not to. Pleasant Grove, for quite a while, has just hasn't had maybe it's their fiscal responsibility that they felt, participating in that just wasn't appropriate, and there's been some changes politically in that city, and I hope that by moving there, I would have an impact on it.
Well, it seems as we just had some municipal elections, that this might be the time to reach out again with changes. Because maybe from one administration to the next, it's not even on the radar. So it's a good time.
It's the right time to do it. I mean,
It's the
we're all
right
in the
time,
budget
yeah.
process, so.
And it's budget season, yeah. Just an idea that you might want to send another letter out
Eric,
to the new people.
what's the typical process when you meet with new members of mayors and city council? Do you have a presentation you present to them about the commission?
Yeah.
What, if we wanted to help reach out and open the doors, what's the process? Would we contact you to do a follow-up meeting with cities or what?
Historically, what I've done is I've set up an appointment on the city council and presented to the city council, and then send a follow-up letter that has all the specifics about what the membership means and what it does and what that particular city's contribution would be, and that's how we've pursued it in the past.
Okay.
Am I safe to assume, as we've seen one withdraw and it's spread out, that the budget evenly across everyone, that if someone participated, it would reduce everyone's input proportionately?
Yeah.
So let's go get it.
Wow, let's get our own budgets down now.
Okay, so is that just a request item? Everyone take a look at your neighboring cities and the relationships you have, and take every opportunity you can to encourage them to participate. And if you would like to have a specific presentation, then contact Eric and he can pull together the information that's available to make that presentation.
Mr. Chairman, are there presentations scheduled then for this coming year? Anything that's currently scheduled?
Have you-
No, right now.
Have you already made some this year, since the new mayors and councils have been in?
I have not.
Okay.
And we talked about that last meeting, that is, there's quite a few new players on the commission now. Just, I think it's amazing to see what the Utah Lake Commission has done over the years, to recap what's been done as well as some plans going forward would be a nice event.
Okay.
Were you gonna put that on a future agenda item, Eric? That
Yes.
You're gonna do an update plan of some sort?
It'd obviously be important to know the why and the what of the commission and what benefit these cities would actually have that they don't feel like they have.
Okay. Great. Thank you.
Good comments. Any other discussions on the budget? Okay, then for Eric to go forward, he would love to have a motion to approve the tentative budget and go forward.
I'll motion to approve it.
Thank you. We have a motion, we have a second. Welcome, Mayor. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, Eric, good job on the budget. Good luck moving forward. Continue to do a good job. Keep an eye on that. We wanted to just identify as membership changes in the commission, there's also changes to the executive committee. Eric, would you like to just review who the members of the committee are now?
Yeah, so we would like to thank Mayor Wilson and Mayor Hatchfield and Mike Mills for their participation for a number of years on that executive committee, and they will appreciate the work they put into that, and will no longer be tasked with that portion of the commission. At this point, there's probably one opening spot that we'll kind of take a feel for who might fill that in the future, but right now, we would like to propose that the following. So it would be Vice Chair Mark Seastrand, Chair Shelley Barch, Mike Styler, Chris Finlinson, Commissioner Ivy, and Richard Nielsen would be those who make up the coming year's executive committee.
And this committee meets each month and reviews?
More or less each month. So we kind of we have a placeholder on the monthly meeting. It usually ends up being probably every other month or so. When it was originally designed, it was not intended to have regular meetings. There's no mandated number of meetings, but we bring that group together as needed.
So did you say that Shelley's the chair, Mark's the vice chair, then Mike, Chris, Nathan, and Richard are on the committee?
Correct.
So if that's okay, any other discussion, we would entertain a motion to approve the executive committee.
So moved.
Thank you.
I'll second.
Thanks, Mr. Ross. Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. And we're that one today. Move along. All right, next up.
Chairman Cease, sorry, I missed who seconded that recording for the minutes.
Take
Either one.
your pick. Okay, direction for the ULC Technical Committee regarding research funding. You want to mention that? Rick?
And just for the record, the reason why I'm looking so awkward right now, I separated my clavicle from my sternum on the weekend, and so I'm
Robotic.
Yeah, I thought. Straight up.
and so when I wince a little bit, it's just that. So I apologize. So the technical committee, the legislative session appropriated $500,000 for research on Utah Lake. I would like some direction from you on how we vet those research projects. The proposed idea that I would give you, and let me know how you feel about this, is that we would take ideas and direction from both the Utah Lake Water Quality Study Steering Committee and Science Panel, and then also Wasatch Front Water Quality Council, who's also doing research on the lake, who was very much the impetus for getting that funding in place, also has a funding mechanism of their own, and it has a group of scientists that are employed at doing research on Utah Lake. And so, as it stands, the idea would be that we would take input from both of those groups, and then as our Utah Lake Technical Committee meets, we would make final decisions on research projects through the Utah Lake Technical Committee, which is made up of a representative from each of the members of this board. If there's ideas to do that differently, I'm very open to those.
Is TSSD involved at all?
TSSD participates on the technical committee. At this point, they are not a member of the governing board. They are a member of the Wasatch Front Water Quality Council.
So, if there are fees that get imposed, it's going to go to them and then to most of us.
They are also a member of the Utah Lake Water, or the Water Quality Steering Committee as well. So they represent on both. David Barlow is their representative. He's the assistant general manager at this point, from what I understand, and their engineer, and he is on both, representing on both those groups.
Is there financial gain on the researcher or the research aspect that they would vote? They would recommend something that might not be needed if they're sitting on a board that would recommend we do something. I nothing making any sense.
I do understand. So are they conflicted?
Yeah.
The steering, so on the Utah Lake Water Quality Steering Committee, that is being guided by, and it hasn't actually been finalized, we're just finalizing it at our next meeting, but they are seating a science panel that is fully independent, non-conflicted. That body will also have an ex officio group made up of a variety of folks that may have conflicts, that may not be independent. But at the end of the day, the recommendations coming from that entity will be independent, non-conflicted folks from that science panel. And so the science panel would send their recommendations to the steering committee. The steering committee may have conflicts, but again, that will be coming from a non-conflicted source. And then the Wasatch Front Water Quality Council, they're all paying members to that group, and they're putting those funds into research on the lake, and this would be this is a separate source of funding to complete projects that their funding can't do, and that the Division of Water Quality's funding also couldn't. So it's a third source of funding to complete some of those new projects.
So this money that was appropriated then to the technical committee, and since the technical committee...
To the commission.
To the commission as a whole, but is the technical committee then responsible for distribution of those funds? And meaning, is the approval process through the technical committee to go to either of the steering, for projects that the steering committee might recommend or the science committee might recommend? Or does it come back to this body for approval of?
It can do that. So one of the, that's what we're open for right now. One of the constraints of that is that we meet quarterly, and there will be a lot of projects moving out, but we could probably accommodate that. Our next meeting is in June. There's a good chance that we will be aware of a number of projects that need to take place to answer the questions that we're looking for research-wise.
Well, my suggestion is that the technical committee be the one that approves it, because we all have someone who sits on that, and the relationship should be there. So instead of waiting for the quarterly meetings, because the technical meeting meets every other month,
Yep.
So that might be more timely in that distribution of funding.
Okay, and then just report back to this group which projects are being done?
That's what I would suggest, yeah.
Okay.
Or I make a motion.
So so what you're suggesting is you let the technical committee make the approval and authorization of the funding as opposed to them recommending and the approval being done at the commission?
Yeah, just for a timely manner, because we all have someone who sits on that technical board who should be communicating to each city on what's happening. And you can always call and say, what do you think before, and then just reporting to the general board.
So who is on the technical committee?
I am.
I don't think everybody is.
But all of you have a representative. It's usually someone from your public works or each city has someone assigned.
I just get nervous when unelected officials spend money that we'll not really count on. We're elected to, we're on the board because we're elected officials, most of us. We're supposed to be stewards of that money. If there's a way to approve a chunk of money for specific things and then let the technical committee say, well, we want it to go this way or that way, so it could be a little bit more general. I don't mind doing that. But I think I'd just be less and say they can approve it. And if we said we're okay to approve projects for these kinds of things, and then let them figure out the details. Anyway, that's just.
Yeah, thoughts over here.
I think that's pretty wise counsel under the Interlocal Agreement Act. It's purposeful that it's elected officials and then state agencies that are members of the
Yeah,
completely
I understand what you're saying.
suggesting, but I think the recommendation comes from the science panels and the experts, but it ought to be this body ultimately that would approve it. But that being said, the discussion is valuable, but it may be a little premature. Actually, I think it would be absolutely premature to make any kind of motion as to how this would be done. I think it'd be very prudent for Eric and staff to have conversations with the Department of Environmental Quality, because in the funding bill, the funding is actually appropriated to the Division of Water Quality, not the commission. It has to be really, really clear. So it's the
that's the
state
difference then.
agency that has to make the decisions then ultimately about how this money is handled. So the discussion is helpful and it gives some good input, I think, to water quality, but ultimately, I think
That's
they'll
good to
need
know.
to weigh
But-
in
Yeah,
to give some guidance to us.
That adds a little bit more to the conversation.
And it was our understanding, I think, that it was going to be handled like the original $1 million that was going to be given to the steering committee and this group through the steering committee to do the work at the science panel. So I understood it as being an augmentation of that.
So how would you see then the discussion and the recommendations going forward with then the approval for the funding? How would you see that process taking place?
It wouldn't be my place to suggest that, but I can say, we sit on the Jordan River Commission, and the commission has received quite a bit of money this year from the legislature. We are the state agency that the money is appropriated to, and so we're having in-depth conversations right now with commission staff to determine that, so then staff can then make recommendations to the commission. So I think it's ultimately going to be the department's input with staff and then the recommendation to come back here. But that's what we're doing with the Jordan River Commission, getting it all set up in advance of July 1 when the money's available, and be able to make that recommendation of how to handle it administratively to the commission in advance of July 1.
Okay, that makes more
Any other
sense.
thoughts?
You know, I was just gonna say, and there may not be in this case an opportunity to get matching funds, or as you get that appropriation, there may be other entities out there that have an interest that, for the welfare of the lake, that we might be able to utilize that money to match with something else to increase the pot. So I would just encourage us to look at that as well.
Yeah, there's no reason that this commission couldn't make a decision to do that. That's not part of the funding bill. There was no requirement like that. That would certainly stretch the dollars if the commission said we want to prioritize matching funds.
So does that give you requesting some direction? Does that
Yes.
give you the direction?
That's
You need to go right there.
That's right.
Yeah.
Any other
The
thoughts?
judgment.
Input? Mr. Locke, did you have a?
No, okay.
Okay, so we'll call that item complete with some good direction to you, Eric, and
Thank
the
you.
technical.
Bring it back to us. You know.
Yeah. Okay, annually, we need to do some open public meeting training. So we will turn the time over to Eric and the team to train us. While we're setting up, are you able to hear the discussion? Do we move to this room, make it a little easier to hear? The other room was a little hard, so if any of you can't hear, just raise your hand and I'll see if we can all speak a little louder. Oh, they did?
Yes, and I need to switch.
This better.
No, you just, oh yeah, there we go.
So that it runs through this.
It's if I can't quite tell. Space bar right now. No problem.
Except for right now.
State introductory video on the Open and Public Meetings Act.
Everybody hear that okay?
In this video, we are going to discuss the basic requirements for local government entities as specified in Utah's Open and Public Meetings Act. It is the responsibility of a governing body's presiding officer to ensure that the body's members receive annual training on the requirements of this law. By the end of this video, you should understand what the Utah Open and Public Meetings Act requires of local government entities and how to fulfill those requirements. The Open and Public Meetings Act recognizes that governing bodies exist to conduct the people's business It contains provisions designed to help ensure that an entity's actions and deliberations are conducted openly. In order to understand what the Open and Public Meetings Act requires, it is first important to understand what the Act considers an open meeting. An open and public meeting is when the majority of the governing body meets to discuss or act upon the business of the entity. Public meetings include workshops and executive sessions, but do not include chance or social meetings. A public hearing is the portion of an open meeting at which members of the public are provided with a reasonable opportunity to comment on the subject of the hearing. If necessary, the governing body may limit speaking time. Public hearings are required when an entity imposes or increases a tax or fee or adopts a budget. An electronic meeting is a public meeting convened over the phone or by other electronic means. A governing body may convene an electronic meeting only if they have adopted a resolution, rule, or ordinance governing the use of electronic meetings.
Which we do have.
Under this Act, all meetings must be open to the public unless the meeting is closed to discuss one of the following: the character, competence, or health of an individual, the deployment of security personnel, devices, or systems, collective bargaining issues, pending or reasonably imminent litigation, the purchase, sale, lease of real property, including any form of water right or shares, if an open discussion would prevent the entity from completing the transaction on the best possible terms, investigative proceedings regarding allegations of criminal misconduct, and finally, discussion of information that is required to be maintained as private or protected by the Utah Procurement Code, including trade secrets. A closed meeting may be held only upon the affirmative vote of 2/3 of the governing body members present at a public meeting. During a closed meeting, a governing body may not do any of the following: interview a person applying to fill an elected position, discuss filling a midterm vacancy or temporary absence, discuss the character, professional competence, or physical or mental health of the person whose name was submitted for consideration to fill a midterm vacancy or temporary absence, or approve or pass any ordinance, resolution, rule, regulation, contract, or appointment. If a meeting is closed to discuss the character, competence, or health of an individual, or the deployment of security personnel, devices, or systems, then the person presiding shall sign a sworn, written statement affirming that the sole purpose for closing the meeting was to discuss one of these issues. In these cases, no recorded or written minutes are required. However, if a closed meeting is held for any other reason, the closed portion of the meeting must be recorded, and detailed written minutes may be kept. Both the recorded and written minutes of a closed meeting are considered protected records. The governing body may call an emergency meeting to discuss an urgent matter due to unforeseen circumstances. In order to hold an emergency meeting, 1. Best notice practical of the time, location, and topics to be considered must be given. 2. An attempt to contact all governing body members must be made. And 3. A majority of the governing body members must approve the meeting. The Open and Public Meetings Act imposes certain notice requirements on local government entities. Entities that hold regular meetings, which are scheduled in advance over the course of a year, need to give public notice at least once a year of their meeting schedule. This notice must include the date, time, and place of the meeting. For entities that do not hold regular meetings, the governing body must give at least 24 hours public notice specifying the date, time, and place. All meetings, whether regularly scheduled in advance over the course of a year or scheduled as needed, must provide no less than 24 hours notice of meeting agendas. The method of providing public notice for meetings and agendas depends upon whether a public hearing will be held during a portion of the meeting. It is important to distinguish between notice requirements for regular meetings and notice requirements for a meeting that will include a public hearing. If a public hearing is going to be held, the notice must be published in at least one issue of a newspaper. If a newspaper of general circulation is not available, then written notice should be posted in 3 public places within the entity's boundaries. For regular meetings, an entity is only required to notify a local media correspondent and does not need to pay for the notice if the newspaper chooses not to publish it. Additionally, for public hearings, notice generally must be given at least 7 days prior to the meeting. For both regular meetings and public hearings, written notice must be posted at the principal office of the governing body, or, if no such office exists, at the location where the meeting is to be held. Governing bodies are required to post notice of a public meeting on the Utah Public Notice website. By posting on the website and providing the email of the newspaper or local media correspondent, governing bodies meet the requirement to notify a newspaper or local media correspondent. However, all other notice requirements for a public hearing, such as publishing notices in a newspaper, still apply. Typically, posting on the Utah Public Notice website is done by a clerk or secretary. However, it is the responsibility of the governing body to ensure this requirement is being properly met. The Public Notice website is administered by Utah State Archives, who has prepared a training manual and quick guide for owners and posters, as well as training sessions that may be accessed on their website at archives.utah.gov. Public meeting agendas must include the following: topics to be considered reasonably specified, and each topic listed under an agenda item on the meeting agenda. The governing body may not consider a topic in an open meeting that was not on the agenda. If a new topic that was not on the agenda is raised by the public during an open meeting, the governing body may discuss the topic. However, final action may not be taken on the new topic during that meeting. If your entity is increasing a fee or undergoing truth in taxation, please be aware that there are additional notice and posting requirements. For help in these areas, please carefully study applicable laws or consult with your legal advisor. In addition to notice requirements, the Open and Public Meetings Act imposes certain requirements on the information that must be recorded during the meeting and shared afterward with the public. Meeting minutes and an audio recording need to be kept for all open meetings with limited exceptions. When a meeting, whether open or closed, is required to be recorded, the recording must be complete and unedited. It must include all portions of the meeting, from the commencement through the adjournment. Recordings of open meetings must be made available to the public for listening within 3 days of the meeting. Every entity needs to establish and implement procedures for the governing body's approval of the written minutes of each meeting. Pending minutes are written minutes of an open meeting that have been prepared in draft form and are subject to change before being approved by the governing body. Pending minutes must contain a clear indication, such as a draft or pending watermark, that the governing body has not yet approved the minutes, or that the minutes are subject to change until they have been approved. After holding an open meeting, an entity must make the pending meeting minutes available to the public within 30 days. Approved minutes are written minutes of an open meeting that have been approved by the governing body. Approved minutes of an open meeting are the official record of the meeting and must be made available to the public within 3 business days. Whoever is responsible for taking the minutes during meetings needs to be familiar with what the Utah Open and Public Meetings Act requires be contained in the minutes. When a governing body closes a meeting, the following must be publicly announced and entered into the minutes of the open meeting at which the closed meeting was approved. The reason or reasons for holding the closed meeting, the location where the closed meeting will be held, and the vote of each member of the governing body, either for or against the motion to go into closed session. The recording and any written minutes of a closed meeting need to include the date, time, and location of the meeting, the names of the governing body's members present and absent, and the names of all others present, except for where disclosure would infringe upon the confidentiality necessary to fulfill the original purpose of closing the meeting. Great job. You've now finished the Open and Public Meetings Act video. You're ready to move on to the video evaluation.
Very proud of you all. Good job.
Okay, give the person to your right a high five.
I do have a question on that. Should we have had a public hearing on our budget? We didn't.
No, so we looked in, historically, we did a public hearing for the tentative and for the final. But in looking into that this year, I discovered that you don't hold a public hearing for the presentation of the tentative budget, but rather of the final draft of that budget. So in our our June meeting, we will have that'll be a public hearing.
Thank you. Any other questions? And part of this is also to say, is there anything we feel we need to give direction for Eric and his team to modify? Are you feeling like you're getting the agendas in advance? They're being well noticed and publicized? Are you feeling like the minutes are accurate and reflective? Is there any timing issues we need to do there? I don't recall having a closed door meeting in this group, so that typically rarely comes up. So any thought or feedback to Eric on the compliance with the open door meeting requirement?
Just one thing, they said that we adopt the yearly meeting schedule, right, which we did last time, and then it's supposed to be posted one time in one of those sources. Is that just on a website that we have?
It is on our website. Do we have
so that everyone knows what
I can double check. I know what's on our website. But,
yeah, so on the UtahLakeCommission.org, there's a section for all of the agendas and meetings, and it has all of those posted, and we make every effort to adjust those if adjustments are made, which they occasionally are.
Okay, we really appreciate what you're doing. We know it takes effort to be in compliance. It's important to make sure we're following the requirements there because it's good policy. I think it really helps us stay open. So if anyone sees issues, please let us know. We'll try to address those as quickly as possible. Okay, Eric, this is your day. I mean, go ahead.
I'm going to try to hand off as many of these as I can, but let's kind of run through those. The lake levels so far this year, we are up to about 2.75 feet below full at the lake this year, which is a great way to start for a not very good water year. Last year, in the fall, we had been as low as 8 feet below full. And so, and then we got a great winter last year. Whereas this year, it's nice that we're starting out so close to full because runoff is likely not going to be what it was last year. So that's where we are today. Sam, can you give us? I don't think that we have anyone from State Parks. Could you give us a quick update on the most recent?
So the state park right now is holding meetings on their dredging every other week, and I'm attending those to make sure we're up to date on their information. We had the meeting this past Tuesday, 2 days ago. There was some additional funding that state parks, the Division of State Parks was able to secure for the project, so they're doing some additional dredging. Part of the area that they scheduled for the dredge, they're going to dredge an additional 2 feet down to make it 4 feet down. Their main concern right now is space to site the material. So as of right now, the project's, I think, 67% complete is what they said on Tuesday. They are planning on converting one of their parking lots, not the easternmost large parking lot, but right next to it there by their campground. They're going to create another berm and site additional material there that's been all approved and everything else, because they'd like to try and take advantage of the fact that they're doing the project now and have additional funding to try and remove some additional material from the marina. So as it stands right now, the channel from the inner marina out to the lake is going to be 4 feet deep. The outer marina so far will be left as it is. And the inner marina right now, I think they have funding and location for 4 feet for about half of the inner marina. And they're kind of going to take it as each day. If they have more space available, they'll continue to take a little slice off the pie as they move themselves through the inner marina. So it's progressing well. They told us, Geneva Rock told us that they believe they should be done with dredging, at least the way it's projected right now, mid-April. However, after the dredging is complete, there is a significant cleanup process that needs to be done, removing all the equipment. They're actually lengthening the boat ramps by several feet for boat launch. They have to reinstall the docks, so there is a variety of other work. So currently, State Park Management is extrapolating they hope to be open by Memorial Day weekend for the public. So that's where we're at right now.
Thank you. Phragmites removal, were there any questions on the park? Phragmites removal, Powell Slough has been fully smashed, is what they refer to that. And the contractor is now working in Provo Bay, and I haven't had a very recent update on that, but they're still working in Provo Bay, and they're working on the north side of the bay, starting from the northeast corner and working their way west towards the airport. And they should be done, I imagine, here in the next month or so, but we'll see how that goes. We did receive grants. We were ranked up high for both our Department of Agriculture and the DNR's Watershed Restoration Initiative, and so that will provide $300,000, give or take, in funding for the county and some contractors to get a lot of work done this year. Close to 4,000 acres is what we talked about at our last meeting. It goes from Saratoga Springs all the way down to Provo Bay. And that's where we'll be focusing our efforts for the next 3 years, is to really take care of that portion of the lake before moving on with too many resources on the southern end of the lake.
And so this is the first year of the 3-year smashing program?
Correct. Well, smashing and chemical. Richard, yeah.
Just one thought to add for the various communities around the lake. If you have Phragmite issues in your community that's off of the lake, please get with our weeds folks at the county. We would love to be able to be a partner with the cities, provide some, even some chemical and some expertise there on how to handle it. We don't necessarily have the manpower to be able to just come in and do it for you, but we'd like to be a resource for you.
And I can help connect you with them if you need help, or Richard, if you have Richard's contact. Speaking of that,
Can you just repeat how many acres we were talking on the 3-year project?
that's about 4,000 acres,
4,000 acres.
just over. Our National Park Service Rivers, Trails, and Conservation Grant, that's the time of Brandon Stocksdale for the next year. We have our first kickoff meeting coming up on the 28th, and that will be bringing all of the stakeholders together, the county, various municipal folks that are involved in trail planning, all together to finalize the plan and look for funding and establish right away, or not establish the right away, but establish the trail delineation over the next year. So we're excited to be getting going on that. They have that'll be an aggressive schedule to kind of get that done. We'll be meeting monthly with them and that stakeholder group, so we will provide updates as progress is made there. The Marshmaster purchase, as the funds arrive, so this, as you recall, was a multi-sourced project. We have funding coming from Forestry Fire and State Lands, through the legislative appropriation process from the Department of Agriculture. And there's, all of these have been ranked well, and we're just getting final word on how those get delivered. And so we'll be working on those as those funds come in. Most of those funds won't be available until July 1st. Some of those just prior to that. And we're working with Utah County on figuring out how to either pass that through to the county or send it directly to the manufacturer that we're getting those machines from. As soon as we have made those purchases, we'll report back to the board and let you know how those are working. The legislative grant, we talked about that. Brian, thank you for the update on that. We will work with Department of Environmental Quality on making sure that we use those funds correctly. And again, we'll report back on what the final process looks like on how those funds will be distributed. Okay, we had a discussion a couple meetings ago about the potential for adding new members to the governing board that were not currently on the interlocal agreement. And so on the back here,
The separate packet.
on this separate packet, we have printed off what the interlocal agreement looks like. On the back of that, you'll see Appendix 1, which has been updated with, hasn't been updated for a long time, so Genola is no longer a member. Mapleton is no longer a member, so we'll have to scratch that one out. Highland City was added, Payson City, Salem City, Spanish Fork City, and Woodland Hills cities have all been added to the commission, so those, we'll keep an updated version of that online. After speaking with the county attorney, I guess I would put it before the board. In order to change our interlocal, what it would require is, if you see in 1.6, in order to adjust that so that we can have a different type of entity be a member of the board, it would require that every member of the board take the interlocal agreement to their city, present it to city council, get that approved, and then re-sign all of the interlocal agreements between. And so, is that something that we would like to pursue? The goal is to be able to add entities like Timpanogos Special Service District or the Utah Valley Convention and Visitors Bureau, entities like that might have an interest that have expressed an interest, but currently under the description of members or parties, they do not fit that description.
This would be to be voting members?
To be voting members, contributing voting members.
Paying members?
Yeah. And
Will
so
they pay? Did you say they would pay as well? No? Because
we have the
in
ability.
theory, I mean, I could see like the restoration group, they'd love to be on this board, I would think, right?
Possibly. But again, that, you know, based on our previous discussion, this would be entities that this board would make the decision on as to whether anyone could express interest, I suppose, but they would not become a voting member until this board selected those that wanted to be part. Timpanogos Special Service District is one that at least a good portion of this board had articulated an interest in having them be members, as well as that entity had expressed an interest in being a member. That kind of was the impetus for looking into this.
So I understand the process. So if we wanted to add someone to the interlocal agreement, we would need to make that request to all the city councils. They would need to vote on it, sign it, ratify, come back and modify the interlocal agreement.
Can I make one clarification? So I was the one who went and met with the county attorney. So to answer Chair Seastrand's question, If we want to add somebody to the commission who's not currently a member, but they already qualify under sections 1.6 or 1.7, it's just a vote of this board and we put them on Appendix 1. But if they do not qualify, we need to change the interlocal agreement so that it's maybe more open, like Eric said, to extend to other government agencies. And that is where it would need to be taken to the city council of each of your municipalities and would need to receive a 75% vote by that city council to support that amendment. Does that make more sense? Is that clear? Any other questions about it?
So just let me make sure I understand what you're saying. If we amend the interlocal agreement, it would make somebody like TSSD that could then be in that qualifying group of entities.
Yes, that would be the purpose of amending.
But if I'm reading this right, under 5.4, they could be an ex officio member now.
He wasn't on specifically TSSD. Robert Moore wasn't 100% certain, but for a variety of the agencies like Utah Valley Convention and Visitors Bureau do qualify under ex officio.
Mm-hmm.
The discussion I think Eric was referencing was from September's meeting was about adding voting members,
Right.
which is where we would need to make a change. The ex officio is fairly open right now as to how it describes who can be a member.
So why would we want TSSD, for example, to be a voting member? Because we already have in TSSD.
Cities that are represented on it.
It's like an indirect, a double indirect.
One thing I can see for you cities that are part of TSSD is if they're a voting member and now pay to be a member, your city's paid twice. So, could you pay with your fee through TSSD and then with your city as well? So,
I think the idea was that TSSD represents a number, at least 2 cities offhand, if not 3 cities that are not members of the commission, and it was a way to include sources from those cities that were currently not on the board.
as I would look at it, think an ex officio membership for TSSD would be an appropriate way to go. It gets them a seat at the table, but not necessarily a voting member.
I'd agree with that.
TSSD ought to approach those who aren't members already.
That
Could have that would support TSSD's opinion or whatever. That they would be here and be a paying member and a voting member already as outlined in 1.6.
Okay.
And it would seem that, I mean, we're all trying to look for the best decision going forward. We'd certainly be open to input from the public or from anywhere to help make that decision. But it sounds like you're not getting much in terms of saying there's a need to add additional voting members. But I don't know, my misunderstanding what's got to be said there. What are you hearing, Eric?
No, I think that originally, in the previous year, in our executive committee meetings, there had been a desire to figure out how to include additional members so that we would have, specifically with TSSD, they had expressed an interest because they're interested in getting some of the research done on the lake. And if they were a member of the commission, that would be a logical way for that fund to be used by the commission for research done on the lake, because it would be kind of an additional source of funds that could be dedicated just to research. And so we went down the road of determining whether or not they could be a member, and this is kind of the response to that.
Okay.
Well, I'm just thinking if they feel it's important to have that research done, they can be an ex officio and they can come to the table and as a body, if we feel it's appropriate, we would approve it. So, I don't know that they need to be a voting member. I think we can vote collectively as cities to associate with them in their best interest.
And that when you say we could approve it, you mean approve the use of?
Well, if they come to the table with an idea that benefits the purpose of what we're trying to accomplish, and we didn't create the idea, but they come with it, I would vote for it. So they don't need to necessarily be individually a voting member to have that same accomplishment.
All right.
Is there a restriction on funding, though, that funding can't go to a non-member organization or entity?
certain monies are earmarked and can only be used within certain fashions, and that would be the only, I guess the only, not that I'm saying, I agree with ex officio for this particular organization. I just, is there, if they do have an idea, are we prohibited in using commission funds to support that idea because of the way the monies are allocated?
No, and more specifically, it would be this commission using their funds to accomplish some goal or idea.
I hope we're open to any good idea, whether it comes from this group or anywhere else. That's the whole purpose of this commission, is to try to vet those ideas and be a pool of ideas that can come together. So tell them to come and bring them in.
It would be them making Baron's job even more difficult, or Dr. Richard's job even more difficult by adding additional projects. I'm sure they'll do.
So the process then, if they want to become an ex officio board member, we just vote to include them as such.
Yep, and those are available for 1 year increments.
1 year increments, okay.
Is there an amount of how many we can bring on? Is there a parameter that says you can allow?
No, I don't think that there's one that says how many. As long as they fit that description, they can be an ex officio member.
Well, it's obvious this is on here for a reason, and we haven't really heard evidence from someone else why they really wanted to have this changed. It would be good to know those things too, though, before we just throw it out completely. What is the purpose of it? Of having more voting members and us being able to have more voting members. The more voting members we have, the more diluted some things might get at a point.
Yep.
Yet, in transparency and hope to make sure that we get the right things, sometimes dilution is helpful. Yet in the same sense, trying to expedite a process, can cause us some problems or help in the issues. But there had to have been a reason we're talking about this. Me not having been here before, I don't know what the history is of that.
Again, I think that the idea was, how can we get participation from all of the municipalities, as much contributions as we can to further the projects happening down on Puget Lake. And so if there were organizations in the valley that had an interest in making a contribution and making a difference at the lake, that we would find a way to incorporate that in and give them a seat at the table as a way to balance their perspective on where those funds would go.
And I think part of that question then came to, how would we go about doing that?
Yeah.
So you're reporting on, here's the process to do that, should we go forward. Is there a specific proposal on the table that you're looking to go forward with this through the city councils? Or is the process, if we want to go forward, the project can be proposed and then we can decide on that specific project? Is that kind of the thought?
Not so much the specific project. It really was conversations with TSSD saying, what would it take to adjust this or amend our interlocal so that they could be a member of the board.
To invite them to come and represent themselves and have that discussion?
Yeah, and that has changed recently. John Adams retired, so I guess we can talk with David and see what, and I don't know if they haven't hired a new.
I think the best way for them to represent themselves is have their cities here.
Acting right now.
I don't think they need to go have their cities be here. I mean,
I didn't hear that word.
I see the best way for them to represent themselves is have their cities here, right? Because the TSSD, we don't, but others participate in that
Yeah, there's
organization.
10 cities
Yeah.
work with another special service district.
Get the cities here.
Yeah, the way I look at it, they already have representation
Yeah.
here, so if you had another group, I mean, then you're getting a voting block.
Yes, you're buying
Pretty,
votes.
pretty powerful, but they can get all their cities if they want to come be part of this.
I agree, and the only reason why I think that they would be a unique voice is that they, in representing publicly owned treatment works, as long as we didn't stack the deck with publicly owned treatment works on the governing board, so that you had an outweighted voice, they do have a unique perspective on the lake, in that they're right on the lake. The water that they treat goes into the lake, and there's a public perception about what that water looks like and what that impact is on the lake. And so they do have a unique voice as opposed to the elected official from each of those cities that they represent.
Right, but
Just have them bring the voice.
ex officio, wouldn't the ex officio be the same thing? They could have their voice, but they just wouldn't be voting? I mean, they'd be here to have a voice.
We may figure after they come as an ex officio, we say, man, we need to get them on the board, or we may, as a group, we make that determination at that point.
Okay.
That's an easier way to do it.
Any other comments, Herb? I think you got some feedback from
Yeah.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
beyond even the special service districts, from the way I read this, the cities that do qualify as members but are choosing not to participate could also become ex officio members. It's another way to get them here. I imagine some of the conversations with the cities are, come be a member, it'll cost you this much. They make a decision based on funds, maybe they want to participate, but, well, we're not going to be a member because we're not going to pay for it. But they could still be here in an ex officio capacity for a year, and either they choose not to participate, or we can tell them at that point as the board, all right, you've been an ex officio for a year, now we'd like you to come on board.
Great idea.
That's a great idea.
That means we could even vote right now as a governing board to appoint those to sit on our committee to do that, then is what you're saying.
It does seem to read that way.
We'll
Let's reach out to them.
Yeah, we'll send out a letter of invitation to each of the cities that are not currently members to participate at least as an ex officio member.
It does say that public agencies or other organizations may petition the governing board, so it seems it would need to be from them for the last.
We invite you to petition.
Yeah.
Great suggestion.
Thank you.
Okay. Next item, lake innovation proposals. Item number 5, is that you, Larry?
Sam, do you want,
Okay, you're on.
Okay, so as it says on the agenda, the most recent update is we have now purchased the equipment for the weather sensor that will go into American Forks Boat Harbor. We've partnered with University of Utah's MesoWest program. Basically, they manage a variety of weather stations for various public agencies. So they're receiving that equipment. DWQ, thanks to them for partnering with us, we're getting a SIM card from their team that will then be matched with that, and then we're just going to be scheduling the installation at American Fork Boat Harbor. Also, just to highlight on that, UDOT agreed to move up their timetable on a sensor they were already going to be installing on the west side of the lake, down by mile marker 17, so a couple miles south of Saratoga Springs. They moved it up, are willing to do so I think they said either March or April, so I'll be following up with them this week. And we hope to see that sensor also included in the data that we'll be putting out to the public on our website as a source for recreation enthusiasts and anybody else who's interested. Any questions on that?
okay, thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead on the...
So our technical committee, Reed Price is currently our chair, and Scott Daly has been proposed as the vice chair of the technical committee meeting. Right now, we're kind of working through figuring out what next steps are for that. We started the review of the Utah Lake Commission's master plan, but upon further discussion with Forestry, Fire, and State Lands, we're going to hold off just a little bit on that while they finish up some other major projects on plan reviews. But that will be something that we do in the near future is review the master plan and get a revised version of that ready for 2019 is kind of what we're shooting for, on having a revised version of our master plan. And then just to kind of remind the governing board, the technical committee serves at your pleasure. And so if there are questions that you have or ideas that you have on projects for Utah Lake, or questions that you have that you're not sure of what happens, those are the kinds of things that the technical committee is designed to answer. And so they can get a request from this body, they study it, and then bring a recommendation back to this body. So as you have questions, as you have ideas, please bring those up, send them to me, or to the chairs, Reed Price or Scott Daly, and let us study those and come back to this board with some recommendations.
Great. Okay, item number 7, Utah Lake Water Quality Study Update. Erica or Scott?
I'm here for Erica.
Okay.
I'm Jim Harris, by the way, for those who don't know me. So, and Eric already kind of touched on this, where we're at with our steering committee, and at this point, we're in the middle of voting and deciding on members to the science panel. And the last meeting we convened, and I don't know if you guys have had a meeting in between the first meeting and the second steering committee meeting?
We did.
You did, okay. So you have a little bit of background on setting the priorities for the science panel and what kind of expertise we wanted to identify. And I think we have a very good list of candidates. I think we had 25 nominees from the steering committee members who got some commitment in advance from the individuals they were nominating, and discussed the commitment to the science panel. And so I thought we had a great response to that. And so we're in the process of finalizing it. April 3rd, I think we have another phone meeting to kind of finalize the voting on that meeting, that panel, to get that group together. Is there anything you want to add to that?
No, not at this point.
Okay.
That's good, thank you.
Thank you. Item number 8, update on the other lake-related projects. Start with Eric on the renewable energy innovations.
Yeah, just a brief update from their perspective. They hosted a cool technology demonstration with BYU, which BYU professors came up with a new starter, if you will, for treating green waste. That was well attended. We had folks from all the way from Davis County, all the way down through to the valley here, on a new technology that can take what has historically been very difficult to deal with. You end up with composting or windrows or any number, grinding up the green waste. And now with this, they're going to do a couple scale-up projects where it can digest green waste and turn it into fuels and carbon dioxide and natural gas in a very efficient, quick way. And so that was received very well, and they'll be working with a couple of the existing folks to do full-scale versions of that. And then they continue to meet with a variety of POTWs in the valley on getting some of their other technologies established as well. We'll be hearing more about them here in the next little while. And then Laura will talk real briefly about lake restoration solutions.
Great. I'll stand awkwardly up here. So probably most of you are aware of Lake Restoration Solutions proposal. So we refer to it right now as the Utah Lake Exchange Offering. You can go to the next slide, Eric. You don't have to read this. This is probably the worst. This is the most graphically unrich presentation I've ever made.
I can suggest you introduce yourself.
Oh yeah, sorry.
There's a lot of new folks here,
Yep.
maybe even a little bit out of our division and why.
Yep. Sorry. So I'm Laura Alt. I'm the Sovereign Lands Program Manager for the Division of Forestry, Fire, and State Lands. Sovereign lands are those lands that were navigable at statehood, so Utah Lake is one of those. We also manage Bear Lake, Bear River, Great Salt Lake, Jordan River, and parts of the Green in Colorado, and now a mile stretch of the Weber River the Supreme Court recently gave us. So we manage these for the public trust. Anything we do has to be a balancing act against navigation, aquatic beauty, wildlife habitat, water quality, those kind of things, public recreation. So any private activity or commercial activity to be gained on sovereign lands has to be balanced against those and be in the best interest of the public trust. Anybody have any questions? So yeah, Forestry, Fire, and State Lands manages the bottom. We only own the bed. We don't own the water. We own the bottom of the submerged lands in the state of Utah. Thanks, Brian. So in November of 2017, we had a what we call a nomination. So Lake Restoration Solutions nominated the entirety of the bed of Utah Lake for to do the work, the restoration work, and then building islands that would then become the property of Lake Restoration Solutions. And so per our rule and statute, we put that offering out for 45 days to anybody out there that wanted to have a competing application. We received no competing applications, and this is the offering that was in the newspaper that went out to all adjacent landowners and lessees along Utah Lake. You know the next one. So like I said, we received one proposal, so our plan is, since we received one proposal and it meets the criteria outlined in our rule, is that we will accept that proposal. That doesn't mean we're doing the project. It means that we're taking a deep dive, and that means we enter this process. So if any of you are around for the proposed bridge across Utah Lake, it's virtually a similar process. The big difference being obviously that was for a lease, and this is for an exchange. Like, we will dispose of lands in exchange for this conservation if it is to come to fruition. So this is the process from the start to the finish. We received the nomination, we notified, we posted it in the Utah County Administration Building, we put it on our website, we mailed it to landowners, we posted it in the Deseret News, the Salt Lake Tribune, and the Daily Herald 3 different times. We received, like I said, the one proposal. We evaluated that proposal for completeness. We'll reject any incomplete proposals. We didn't have any incomplete proposals. And then the remaining proposals advanced to this review process. So that's where we're at. You can go to the next slide, Eric, please. So the next step, like I said, is to accept the application formally. Then we'll ask the Public Lands Policy Coordinating Office at the Governor's Office to seat a resource review specialist team for us. So that'll be made up of state agency experts from DEQ, UDOT, state history, obviously the DNR, anywhere we think that we need help. And they'll come and do a deep dive on the application, and then they'll make a request for additional technical information that we need. And in doing that, we realize that there's probably going to need to be an environmental impact statement that's done with the Army Corps, maybe the Fish and Wildlife Service. So what we try and do is line all that up so it's all done together, and we get what information we need while they're doing that EIS process, and the Corps gets what information they need. So that's about where we are. Because this isn't consistent, like Eric mentioned, it's not consistent with the existing master plan. We have to do a site-specific planning, and all of this involves public comment periods, a couple of public comment periods, public meetings. So that's what we're getting ready to kick off. This won't be a quick process. I expect this to take at least a couple years to get to a point where we'd make a decision, if not longer.
So the review process is 2 years? We're anticipating?
Well, yeah, it could, if somehow they can get the information back quicker, then it'll go quicker. It really, at this point, will depend on the project proponent and how quickly they can get information back. And, it'll probably require some studies, some coring of Utah Lake, things like that take time and resources. And so at that point, it'll probably be, that's how, at least in the past, that's been it. We ask for the information, and however long it takes to get the information back is kind of on them.
I think for anyone that's going to go report back to your own councils, instead of saying a 2-year, because that starts to put a time frame on it, it will likely be a multi-year process.
Yep, that's a better way to put it. The project proponent has a timeline. We think their timeline might be a little quick. So, yeah, I think obviously, as quickly as they can provide the information, we'll respond. And then in the meantime, if you go to the next slide, there was a bill. So we've kind of held off on accepting this application and doing some things because there was a bill by Senator McKell, or Representative McKell and Senator Henderson about Utah Lake and what the division can do. So if you haven't read this bill, HB 272, is that what it is? 272. It's online. You can read it off of this lovely PowerPoint for the next 4 pages if you want, but you don't need to. You can find it online. So that's why kind of we've been holding off to see how all this shook out.
So this did pass then?
Yes. Yeah, but it hasn't been signed by the governor as far as I know.
He was signed, I thought he was going to sign it the next
Probably,
day.
yeah, there hasn't been any pushback that I've heard of. So, any other questions? I'm sure some of you will, and the technical team definitely will be called upon to participate in the resource review team. And of course, anytime the commission has questions or wants further updates, we're happy to do that.
I want to speak to the bill and maybe clarify for folks really what's in there. There's a lot of misunderstanding.
So the bill contains, so if you go to the next slide, Eric, it talks about what's the challenges that the lake's facing, fluctuating lake levels, algae blooms, loss of native vegetation, invasive plants, silt, all that stuff. And then if you go to the next one, it talks about the need to do restoration and that the division, so if there's a project, it has to meet all of this criteria, a restoration project. So restore the clarity, conserve water resources, preserve water storage and water supply, remove invasive plant and animal species, restore the littoral zone, like those kind of the wetland communities around it, restore native fish, shorebird habitat, improve navigability. Go to the next slide. And then, let's see, make recreation opportunities. And this was one of the big pushbacks. Make sure that there's preservation of current water rights related to the lake. So during this process, there would be no loss of anybody's water right. And then basically improve the lake. So any project that we review that deals with restoration of Utah Lake has to meet those standards. And then if those are met, it allows the division to dispose of sovereign land in exchange for meeting these. So that's kind of the big part of it.
This bill does not approve the project.
No.
Right.
Nor does it change anything we would have done from a planning or process standpoint. Those were two of the biggest misperceptions.
Right.
I think even by some legislators possibly, when we sat and listened to the testimony, this really has no impact on our process, although for Laura as the lead, for me as the initial decision maker, this clarifies some legislative intent. This gives us some clearer sideboards and makes it very clear, which was debatable in advance, whether or not we as the division could dispose of state sovereign land for restoration benefit. We've been told by the legislature it now can happen. The courts might have a decision to make along the way about that as well, but at least the legislature has told us what they think.
And we fully expect, and the project proponent understands, that there will be challenges to this project.
Yeah, oh yeah.
It's quite a significant, this hasn't really been done in the U.S. project. For the most part, right?
Laura can probably
There's
speak
been
better.
some smaller scale projects. Yeah, in Texas and Florida and places, but obviously on a much smaller scale. One of the people working on this project worked with the islands, created the islands in Dubai. So yeah, it is kind of new territory for
Chair
sure.
might be speaking to the notion of disposal.
Oh, disposal?
State sovereign
Yeah,
land.
disposal happens occasionally, but yeah. Thanks.
This would be precedent setting nationally.
Yes.
This has impacts beyond the state of Utah.
Right, we fully expect that every state will be looking at us to see how we go through this process.
So right now, we're putting the review committee together, though, right?
Yep,
Right?
yep,
If somebody asks, where is
Yep,
it?
so
It's in
we're
review
getting
committee.
ready to officially accept the application. We wanted this legislation to be fully passed and enrolled so that we knew that we had a direction.
As Brian said, it doesn't hurt
No.
by any means, and someone gets clarification.
And
so that's awesome.
we kind of hit pause during the legislative session because the original form of this bill was completely different and would have changed how we would have done So we waited to see the final bill.
Makes your job easier, really, in a way.
Yeah, well,
Drew a line, maybe. Well, at least it drew a line. I shouldn't say easier, but drew a line.
right, I'll take it.
Yeah.
So we'll officially accept the application coming up, and then request that the public lands policy office seat our resource review team.
Click to that second page of this, because that's really where we're at.
Yep.
I mean, we're basically just beginning now the lengthy review process.
I'm gonna pull up number 2.
Yeah.
If I may, a couple other points, and I did see a couple of questions out there. Laura is the program manager for all of our sovereign lands. She runs our sovereign lands program. But Laura is also now the point person, the primary point of contact for the proposal group, but also the lead planner on this project. We're going to have to, we're already in the process of it, rearrange some staffing and make sure that Laura has the time that is going to be needed to do this properly. This will have huge impacts on her job, but all of her staff. Fortunately, the legislature provided some additional funding to bring on some new FTEs, some additional capacity for the division to be able to accomplish these things as we need to. I think it's also important, and this is something we talked about in the executive committee, if you don't mind me speaking to it.
No.
For the commission particularly, but also members of the public to understand where the decision-making authority resides, and therefore possibly some limitations that the commission might have, or at least need to consider in terms of public positions that are taken. The division has the decision-making responsibility initially for this project, and specifically it's the state foresters, the division director, that's me. We would presume that no matter what decision we make, because of how high profile this is, the impact it would have, that my decision is going to be challenged. I mean, I think it would be naive and misleading to say that it doesn't, that there's going to be interest groups on both sides.
Right.
So regardless of the project, our system is set up that if my decision were to be challenged, it's appealed to the DNR director, Director Styler. So it's an internal appeal. And then Director Styler would look to see if my decision is in line with what's consistent with our master plan. And that's really what he would specifically look at.
Yeah.
So we do have to make some changes.
Well, we would do a site-specific plan, so it'd have to be consistent with the site-specific planning would have to be consistent with rule, statute, constitution. So really, you have to make sure that everything you're doing is consistent with the law, basically.
And then if folks wanted to challenge Director Seiler's decision, then it would go into the courts. So knowing that 2 of the member agencies on the commission have the decision-making responsibility, we would advise that the commission not take positions in favor or against anything that's being proposed. If it is the pleasure of the commission to attempt to do that, we would have to recuse ourselves and step back. There is a reason that I never testified while this bill went through the legislature, because it wouldn't be appropriate. Laura will be the point, she will be the face of it. If there are media inquiries, Laura will be the one that you see likely on the nightly news. And I'll have to step back and remain as objective and neutral as possible and take the input from Laura and the review team and the public. There's going to be a lot of public input. That was another misperception. The public input won't change at all. In fact, Laura will probably go above and beyond what we might do otherwise. But I think it's important for the commission to understand that and know that there are some limitations unless we were to step back and recuse ourselves. And that would include us, DNR, and maybe others that, like DEQ, will certainly be a part of this review team.
Though, and DEQ, I would imagine, would likely have some permitting involved as this project goes along as well.
Great. Good advice. We did have some, we had some questions too from the group. So.
Real quick, thanks to Brian's advice, I will sit down with Brian and their Assistant Attorney General this coming week and kind of get some understanding on where the commission can, what the type of statements that the commission can make, and what we'll stay away from, so that we have so that we're clear on how to talk about this project, because the public wants to know about it and wants to get updates on it. And so that we'll understand how we can talk about that from a PR standpoint without putting Brian or anyone else in a compromised position. So we'll be clear on that.
If you had some comments, please.
So, one question. So I'm on the technical committee, and one thing that we've started to do as the technical committee is started to look at the master plan for the Utah Lake Commission, and as part of the master plan, one of the things that it was originally set up to do was to be the management plan that Forestry, Fire, and State Land Use says for Utah Lake, which sounds like it relates to this, which now is a site-specific study, which now is kind of tied into this whole thing, which, so just kind of wondering how, as we move forward with this master plan, which is now tied into this, how we should be kind of moving forward with that in relation to this project and other things.
Right, it's a great question. So originally we talked about, Eric and I, having the technical team reviewing the master plan, and in all honesty, the Utah Lake master plan is great, but it doesn't fit our needs, and we adopted it as our plan. So Eric and I have talked about going along parallel paths and doing a new Utah Lake master plan and doing a comprehensive management plan for the division. So basically doing everything at the same time, but having a volume that meets our needs within the lake and meets the Utah Lake Commission's needs in and around the lake, because a lot of the master plan refers outside of our jurisdiction. But we've kind of hit pause on that, because if this happens, it changes everything. And so we don't feel comfortable moving ahead and spending dollars on doing a new master plan while this is sort of hanging out there. But we will, because it isn't consistent with the master plan, we either have to amend the plan, or we would do a site-specific plan, is what our rule calls for when it's not consistent with the plan. So a site-specific plan wouldn't be a full master plan, but would address the issues related to this project, which would basically be a comprehensive management plan.
And how does the technical committee and Utah Lake Commission provide input into that?
So a couple different ways. In that site-specific planning, the Utah Lake Commission and probably the technical team would have a liaison to our planning team, and also through public comment and everything else. So I would imagine the technical team and the commission will have a seat at the table in that planning process. And we bring it to the commission to review, sit on, make comment.
So along that same line then, since we're kind of switching gears from the master plan to a management plan, and we're revising that on the technical committee, will we address this as we go forward, Eric, in our revisions?
I think we're just going to wait.
We probably will, but for now, we're going to wait. After our last meeting, we spoke again and made, or came up with recognition that this is probably a good time to hold off for a few months until we kind of get a feel for where this is going, and then jump into
and
the
maybe put a
revision
section
again.
in there that may
or just
address
put a total hold on revising the master plan right now until we know if this is going to happen or
because
not.
we were talking about doing the revision to be ready for next year, 2019.
Correct.
So we're not going to be continuing on with it. We're going to hold it off, see what happens, and then go back to.
Because the same, we want to do a parallel process with you, but we don't feel comfortable. We didn't make a legislative request, so we don't have the money to start our planning process, knowing that this was on our plate. So we want to wait until, if this is going to happen, we would do a master plan that contemplates this. If this project doesn't come to fruition, we would do an update of the existing master plan. But kind of separate our plan from your plan a little bit, but parallel paths.
Okay, there was another question here.
Yeah, I'm Rick Cox. I was the consultant for the master plan 10 years ago, and I'm glad to see that it's still being used. But I'm curious about the federal nexus for the EIS and when that occurs. Does that occur after the division makes a determination, and then the consultant can start on EIS, or can they start?
No, so we've done that in the past and that never works out well. We ended up at Supreme Court for doing something similar to that. So what we do now is, like, we accept the application and then we head down that path, and our cooperating agency with, likely in this case, the Army Corps or the Fish and Wildlife Service. So we're a cooperating agency in that EIS, because what we've had before is we made a decision on the Great Salt Lake and said what the Compass Minerals was the company, what they could do, and then they started their EIS, and all of the alternatives were different than what they said, what we said they could do, and it just put us in this.
So it has to be a parallel process.
We've realized it has to be a parallel process, because if we don't, then you know how the EIS process goes. You end up with alternatives, and we've already said they can do something, and none of the alternatives match that. Then what do you do? So.
That's what I wanted.
Yeah, exactly. Start over.
Thank you.
Thank you. Other questions? Say your name, please.
Yes, Jeff Salt with Great Salt Lake Keeper and Friends of Utah Lake. This project, I think, is going to be, as you mentioned, Brian, it's going to be challenged, obviously. And one of the, there's 3 observations that I have that might be helpful for this group to think about. At the time that this bill passed, there was no fiscal note attached, and so there is no appropriation to give Forestry, Fire, and State Lands additional resources just for this project, and that's a huge problem, I see.
There was an appropriation. It wasn't a fiscal note tied in.
Yeah, okay, so it was maybe thought of and corrected.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
In the approved budget bill, there is some additional funding.
Another issue that I see that could be a problem that would affect how this proposal or any proposal goes forward with Utah Lake is you look at the composition of your Utah Lake Commission, you really don't have user groups at the table, even as ex officio members. You don't have public interest groups involved. And even on the technical committee, it's really dominated by representatives from POTWs and municipalities. So I think we need to look at involving the public more in your decision-making process and review process in general, especially to deal with something as important as selling off land that belongs to the public. And the third observation that I might make is that we have the steering committee water quality study process moving, and it seems like this project needs to wait for that also, because the notions or propaganda, I'll call it, that was put forward by the project applicant was that they've done all their studies for the last 10 years, and they've come up with the answer for Utah Lake. And I don't know that anybody's really seen their studies. Are their studies going to be realistic, viable, scientifically defendable, and are they going to be in step with what the steering committee and science committee comes up with, or are they going to be, conflicting? And if we don't wait for the science committee and the steering committee and water quality study process to also move forward in a parallel fashion, I think we end up with a potential train wreck where we give entitlement to an entity, either through zoning or approving a land exchange, and then we get stuck, because then they have entitlement, and if it doesn't work, they could sue to force it to work their way instead of the way that makes sense. So I think there's some really other large policy considerations, and I was going to comment in the public comment section. I think we have some huge problems with constitutionality on this. It's already established case law going back over 100 years that you can't privatize sovereign lands in a way that interferes with the public uses. And the Central Illinois Supreme Court case is the classic case on that. So I anticipate that there are going to be some battles on this for sure, as was appropriately mentioned.
Thank you very much.
Sure.
Any other comments or thoughts on this topic? Okay.
All right, thank you. If you have any other questions, please
We
call me.
appreciate your work. There's an extra bagel for all your work.
Call Laura. If you have questions, call Laura.
Yeah, call me. I made the mistake of putting my phone number and not the main phone number on that.
Thanks, Brian. Okay, moving on to the communication public relations plan. Sam, do you want to?
Thank you. This is my final time in front of you, I promise. So as it mentions there, we are still progressing forward with BYU's on-campus internship program. We have a team of 5 interns working with us. They're evaluating a variety of elements of our outreach to the public. So currently, the most recent update I got from them, they are in the process of reaching out to a variety of organizations about our Adopt a Shoreline program. So they're reaching out to local service clubs, businesses, and other people who might be interested in participating in the Adopt a Shoreline program. So we're currently at 7 out of 27 public access points have been adopted. So we're hoping with their efforts and some other plans we put in place to improve that this year. Our goal, I think, was by June to have 10, so we're already well on our way to hit that goal. We started with only 1 last year, so we've made significant progress on that. They're also going to be evaluating our events, and they have just drafted an example for a new page on our website, which will provide recreation information for the public. So they actually created a survey for us, and we helped disperse that survey. We had 321 responses. It was just a convenient sample, so we emailed it out to people, we posted it online. And with that data of what type of recreation activities people said were popular at the lake, and also with responses on what kind of information they'd like to have access to, we're drafting with our team of interns what we'd like our new web page to look like. So there's ideas such as having maps of the access points, having the weather sensor data that I mentioned before. We're now looking into if it's feasible to try and have some kind of camera feeds at some of the marinas, like Utah Lake State Park has had before. So we're excited about that. Continuing with those efforts, we'll actually be hiring a summer intern soon. We just closed our application period, and we got 34 applicants. So I began reviewing resumes yesterday, and that was more than twice the applicants we received, more than 2 times the applicants we received last year.
This is for 1 spot?
Yeah, so we're doing 1 summer intern. Last year we had some additional budget available to hire on a part-time in addition to a full-time summer intern. But this year, right now, our goal is just to hire 1 full-time summer intern for that. And they'll help us with a variety of more hands-on activities. And then also, in working with interns, we were just approved to do another on-campus internship program with BYU for their fall semester, starting in August and going through December. That project will be entirely focused on content. So it'll be targeted towards English majors, business communications majors, who will help us write different items. So for instance, press releases, blog posts on a variety of topics, whether it's on water quality or water conservation or recreation activities. Because with Eric and I in the office and our summer intern, sometimes our content gets put to the side as we're trying to get events done or work at meetings. So we're hopeful that this fall we'll have another team of 5 interns who are excited to help us develop some more content on our website and in press releases and on social media to continue to help provide more information to the public and in a better manner so that they're aware of everything that's going on at the lake. So I'm excited. The project's been going well right now. I'm looking forward to hiring another intern for the summer. It'll be great to have somebody in the office, and I look forward to the team in the fall.
Can you remind us of the date of the Lake Festival?
It's a good question, actually. So right now it's somewhat under debate. It would be June 2nd of this year if we continue with the typical format. However, in meeting with the state park, it's with the dredging project happening so close to it, they're recommending we consider some dates in late June instead. That's something we'll be taking up with June Sucker Recovery and their consultant, as well as with the state park, to try and determine what's the best date.
So you'll just send that, because our next meeting isn't until June 21st.
Yes, so that information will be sent out to you and be put out to the public once it's confirmed for a date. But if we go with the original, it will be June 2nd, if not one of the later weekends in the month, we hope. Any other questions on anything communications? Okay.
Very, very appreciative of your work. It's not easy to run an internship program, and often it takes more work than the benefit, and watching what you're doing is outstanding.
Yeah, they've been great to work with. We appreciate the opportunity. So thank you, Brian.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, just as a reminder on item number 10, we have the next meeting schedule is June 21st, and then September 27th, November 15th. We wanted to confirm that we would be meeting in the youth here next time as well. So,
yes.
Okay. We now have some open time for some dinner comments from board members or from the public. So please state your name, state your name loudly, and let us know if there's anything to be said. Go ahead.
If I could indulge the commission for another minute, Jeff Salt with Great Salt Lake Keeper and Friends of Utah Lake. I'm also a member of the Utah Anglers Coalition. And as a coalition, we're very interested in what happens with Utah Lake and Provo River, which are, really great fishing resources in our state. But the comment I'd like to add to my previous comments for this group to consider is that anything we do with Utah Lake has to be done in mind, keeping in mind that Utah Lake belongs to all the people of the state of Utah. It's not just a Utah County amenity or resource. And it's easy to, focus and manage it like it's a Utah County resource because of its location. But in fact, because of the way Utah Lake and Great Salt Lake and the other navigable waterways were designated, they belong to everybody in Utah. And so we need to include input from people in Salt Lake, Moab, St. George. Of course, those people would have maybe less interest the further away they are. But Utah Lake has the potential of becoming, it's not there yet, because Strawberry Reservoir is probably our prime fishery in the state of Utah. But Utah Lake has the potential of surpassing Strawberry Reservoir as our best fishery, which would attract more people from all over the state as well as people from outside the state. And so I just want to offer that philosophical point to see if we can keep thinking more broadly to be inclusive of interest and stakeholder groups from outside just Utah County on whatever happens with Utah Lake, the management plan, this proposal, or anything else.
Please, Beth.
Dr. David Richards, I'm a private consultant for UX Consulting. I'm under contract with the Los Angeles Water Quality Council, and I've been working on Utah Lake for 4 or 5 years now. I do a lot of research on there, on the ecology of the lake. So I wanted to give you guys a reality update, real-time synopsis of what's going on in the lake right now. You go out to Provo Bay. Right now, the boreal chorus frogs are out there making more noise than some of the jets flying over top of the Provo Bay. So it's really happening into the Phragmites, which we all say Phragmites might be really bad, but they're using that habitat. If you also go out there on Provo Bay, there are the mule deer are starting to think about having their fawns, and they're hiding in the Phragmites to drop their fawns in the next few months. And the zooplankton that eat the algae that cause the algal blooms are in superabundance right now in Provo Bay, and where the wetlands have been flooded. The Phragmites is being flooded right now. It's up to knee deep or waist deep. And the zooplankton out there are much larger than we typically find, because I think that's because they're able to avoid all the carp and the catfish predation that selectively feed on larger zooplankton. So these zooplankton have the potential to control the algal blooms if we know how to understand and see what they're doing. So things are happening like crazy right now in Provo Bay. Life is beginning to really start to blossom on Provo Bay. So I recommend everyone go out, take a look, take a listen to the boreal chorus frogs. Hopefully the bullfrogs won't come in there. There's I saw a few bullfrogs up in Bear Creek, which is a tributary, and bullfrogs will eat all our native frogs. Bullfrogs are invasive. So there's a lot going on there, and that's what's happening real time right now.
Thank you. Yes, please, in the back.
Yes, my name is Michael Mills. I'm with the June Sucker Recovery Program and also Central Utah Water. Just wanted to make the announcement. Last May, Central Utah Water held the Utah Lake Summit. We have plans to do that again. It will be held on May 14th over at Utah Valley Convention Center. This is trying to give everybody a save the date announcement. Obviously, the agenda isn't all in place yet, but it's May 14th over here at the convention center.
And how will we register for that or get notification?
We have the attendance list from last year that we'll be emailing everybody the registration link, and then also there'll be an announcement on the Central Utah Water's webpage.
Awesome. Thank you. Any other comment? Okay, thank you all for being here. I came across a quote that I really liked this week that I thought was very appropriate for the Utah Lake Commission. This is from Winston Churchill. And the quote is that the pessimist sees difficulty in every opportunity, and the optimist sees opportunity in every difficulty. And I think as we work through our combined efforts to say we care about Utah Lake, and we want to see this be a fantastic opportunity, that I'm sure we'll be able to work through challenges and opportunities ahead of us to turn it into a wonderful scenario. So I will entertain a motion to adjourn, and we will end 2 minutes early.
So moved.
We have a second. Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Just to make sure. Thank you all.